Hi, Dr. Rob.
Good evening, Tammy. I'm a little beachy today.
I can tell. So we've had the Singapore airport information or the flowers and beautiful things, and now we've got the beach. So
It's summertime. We need to be at the beach today. And for everybody who's here, who's at work or at home, hey, a little bit of hope for the weekend.
there you go. Okay, so let's get started. We've got somebody, thank you for last week's suggestions on her questions. It helped a great deal. I'm trying to be more kind to myself in this situation. I'm feeling grounded and out of major crisis mode. That's fantastic. But still really conflicted about my feelings because of my moral philosophy. The last set of disclosures my husband gave me, watching porn at work, having to fantasize about porn while we were having sex just to get off, and lying about his previous excuse why his porn use while overseas consisted of rape, incest, minors, and abuse for everyone's safety, mostly his at the time, made me leave and set strict boundaries. Also said I wanted a divorce. I felt that separation was necessary for both our safety and recovery. There are so many unknowns right now. This last week I told him I'm not making any decisions regarding divorce, giving him time and taking it myself within the first year of recovery. His response was that he has been receiving qualified help he doesn't want to share. Anything about that at this time, he doesn't think we are all compatible as he once thought, and still would like to proceed with divorce. Thoughts?
Oh,
There's more, but let's stop there.
well, okay. So what I heard was a partner who has been down the road before with her husband, I think, around whether their relationship's going to work and his continued lying and cheating, whatever. And they were headed down the road to divorce. And then she thought, well, maybe he's really working on this, and maybe I should address him again and spend some time and review before we give up on this relationship. And then he said, well, I've been thinking about it, and I've been in therapy, and I've decided I don't want to go back to you. And so he wants a divorce. Is that what I just understood?
That's what I'm reading. So,
So what's the question? I'm right here. I just have to do one thing.
yes.
What's the
So
question?
she adds, I still don't know what is considered a sex offender. I've been told by the detective I've turned his laptop over to that an internet history of viewing such content isn't a punishable offense, only the downloading of, but I don't know. But I do know he used it a lot. I've done all I needed to for safety and security, now working on recovery and healing. She got from the podcast, I've got the book, Your Sexually Addicted Spouse. Do you have recommendations for other books or resources without the religious undertones for this specific complex relationship and betrayal trauma? I know I know it's sensitive subject and a lot of
Okay,
professionals
I
don't
have to
want to.
stop. I
Okay.
have to stop you. Sorry, no
Yes.
offense.
No.
I am glad to give, endless resources, information about what is offending, what isn't offending, how does the law look at it, how do you look at it within a family? I mean, all of those things. But I don't understand, and I'm sort of saying this to you, Tammy, but also the person who addressed the question. What I heard was your husband no longer wants to be married to you and he wants a divorce. That means that his sexual behavior, his sexual history, his sexual behaviors in the future really aren't your concern. Unless there are kids or grandkids around and you need to make sure that they're protected, in which case you would need to do that, however you need to do that for yourself. But in terms of looking at his issues, his history, what does his problem really mean? That's now out of your court. Divorce means that's none of my business anymore. It's the good and the bad, right? The good is I don't have to deal with this awful problem in my life in the same way. And the bad is maybe I wanted another chance at this relationship and now I'm not going to get it. But the one thing that goes without saying is you no longer really have much to say about his sex life before, during, or after, because you're no longer in a relationship with a man that wants to be with you. That's what I see. Like the rest of it becomes secondary to that. This is a very busy pattern, isn't it, Tammy?
It is. And the thing, I love the patterns, but they do kind of make your head warp a little bit too. Just saying.
More than that.
Okay, so I'm going to
Do you have anything
share that.
else?
Well, I'm going to share that in the chat I put, because you asked about books, and this is of general interest. There's a whole bunch of books that are listed as resources, and I just put a link in the chat for those. So anyone can go there and check those out. So Here's another
Wait,
question.
wait, I'm sorry, Tammy, did you have a different response? Because I don't know if you
No,
have.
I think you're right. If he's saying I'm done, then I think continue to get support because you still were betrayed, and it doesn't take away the difficulty and trauma of that. So get support for you in working through your feelings. But if he's done with the relationship, then I mean, you both have to be in the relationship to be in a relationship, right?
And also, maybe I want to say it's awfully hard to say I'm thinking over whether or not I want to be with you, and have that person then say to you, "Well, I've made my decision, and I don't want to be with you." I mean, that's a tough one. But no matter how much he may have disrespected you or the relationship in the past, this is a dead stop. I want a divorce. Period. You have to respect that.
So the next one is it just me, or is there an actual correlation between sex addicts having therapists as significant others, or are betrayed partners that happen to be therapists just more likely to seek treatment for being the betrayed partner because they are a therapist? Asking because I'm a therapist and I keep hearing it mentioned in a few different sex and relationship healing literature podcasts. I've recently discovered my partner is a sex addict.
So Tammy, if you don't mind, can you condense that down just a little for me?
Basically, the question is do you think that there's a higher prevalence of a therapist having an addict as a partner, like the therapist being a partner of an addict?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but I'll say this, that as therapists, we are caregivers and we're caretakers, and we have that part of our hearts open. We are often people who can tolerate difficult people in ways that others may not. So I can imagine that it would make sense that we might have a slightly more high number of therapists who are involved with addicts or people who have emotional illnesses, because we're okay with that. And but I think what you're running into is more just I don't know what the effect is called. I want to call it graduate school effect. It's not really that, but it's just that, why does any therapist become a therapist? Because they want to understand their own world. I mean, as much as I might want to help you, my deepest motivation is to understand myself. It's for all of us. And so I think those of us who choose that profession, we really have hopefully done a lot of looking in and a lot of looking out. And I don't think it's really kind of a thing. But I do think that people who've had problems in these areas might choose to specialize in these areas. Tammy and I worked with some of the training institutes for a while, and we saw a lot of women coming in who had been therapists for 20 years, never really had much interest in this until they had a major issue with it in their lives. And then they thought, well, I really want to know everything about this. I think like many spouses do. But they had the advantage of, and I have a license and I can go find it out from the source. And some of them were there, I'm pretty sure, to learn more about themselves than how to do this work. But inadvertently, they learned how to do the work, and once they moved past their own crises, they probably did a great job of it. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that seems to be about it.
No, I concur. And I also think therapists are more, hopefully, willing to look at things like this. There's a lot of people that will completely compartmentalize and won't look at, you're kind of questioning. So do you disagree?
No, I'm listening. I'm taking.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But I was thinking, I mean, if you're in the, examining mental health issues, world, it's a mental health issue. So, it's different than an engineer who, and nothing against engineers, but, it's one of those things where they may be less interested in looking at the correlation. So I just am glad you're here. I think it's great. There's
But I think what you're saying is true, Tammy. It's kind of down to twos don't marry sevens. If you're a person who has come some difficult issues, you're going to look at somebody who's really got it all together and say, oh, they're kind of boring. And if you're someone who's really got it all together and you see somebody who's got a whole bunch of issues, you're going to look at them and say, wow, I think they take a little too much of my attention. And so it tends to be that people who have similar levels of issues tend to find each other to work on them. And I always say just make sure they're sober and they have a therapist first.
And again, I'm glad you're getting support and looking at this for yourself as well as.
I want to go back, Tammy, and say something about the question that came before, because it still strikes me that this is a person, just to say, the person who's talking about her husband's sexual problems is looking at inappropriate behavior and his inappropriate images. And I've heard her talk about that before. And so I think that there's a loss here. Some partners, I think, are really engaged in wanting to solve the problem and make the love return, and they feel like if I can figure it out, then maybe we can move forward. And sometimes that isn't true. Sometimes you might figure it all out and then they don't want to move forward. It doesn't always work the way you might want to. But for some partners, all the working out, what does it mean that he did this? And what does it mean that he did that? And how is it that that is still, in a way, kind of holding on to part of the relationship. Even though it's the not happy part, it's still a way to occupy your mind with thoughts of him or her. And so I would say that it's very easy for us to say, well, he said that he wants to divorce you, so that's none of your business, when you've been studying it and working on it for 6 months trying to figure out if you could return to the relationship yourself. But you have to be wary that if he doesn't want to be with you, then you can't turn it into your obsession to learn about, to study, unless you plan on going into the sexual disorders business, which brings us back to the second question. But let's keep moving.
Okay. So this person says, I've heard about a healing retreat called the Hoffman process. Do you have any thoughts about it? And if it's helpful at all for sexaholics? I've not heard of it. Have you?
Well, but this is a great opportunity to talk. I haven't heard of that, and I'm glad to look into it. If someone sends you a link, in the chat, we can look at it. But this is a great question that I can frame as, what are useful things for addicts to do to get well, and what are not useful things? I think you really have to define what you want to get well from. If you want to work on your addiction, you want to stop acting out, you want to understand your triggers, you want to stop the behavior, then you really have to go to something that isn't maybe a workshop, but more like an intensive process, whether that's with individual therapists or in a group or in a treatment center, all the way to maybe going to residential treatment. Because, hold on, let me just get the question up so I can look at it. Because a lot of times people will go to a retreat center for a couples retreat or a look at my trauma retreat or an introduction to addiction kind of retreat. And what they get is information. They are taught things, and then they might do some processes with other people, but basically they don't necessarily learn with the tools to get better. If you want to go to a workshop, a seminar, because you want to improve your marriage, you want to learn more about yourself in general, you want to deepen your empathy, your compassion, your communication skills, those are all great things to go to workshops for or seminars. But if you have an active addiction, it requires an active therapist who is working with you directly. And workshops and seminars generally, while they say, oh, it's a sex addiction, introductory seminar, generally they tend to be mostly information, and that's nice, but it doesn't tell you how to put it into play. So what I'm saying to you is I'm just trying to define I don't know anything about this particular workshop, but if a workshop says, we will help you look at your addiction, confront your addictive behavior, and find ways to heal, I would pay attention to that. If it's more like discover yourself and how you learn to have these kinds of problems, including addiction, great learning, but it may not help you actually stop the addiction.
That's helpful. So I've just pulled up the website, I'm quick checking, but I've added to the chat information about the Seeking Integrity treatment program so you can compare and contrast.
Okay, so what Tammy did is she put a little bit about our program. And by the way, I want to say in saying this, I am not trying to say don't go to their workshop and go to our program. I really want whoever is online, and I mean this most sincerely, to do what you need best for you. I just want you to understand that if you're dealing with an active addiction and crisis, you're going to need a much more active form of treatment. And if you're more in an observe, learn kind of personal growth mode, that's a whole different process. And if you expect, like, for example, if you're a husband who wants to pull one over on your wife and you want to say, well, I'm going to go to a week workshop and get this sex addiction problem resolved, I got news for you. It ain't going to happen there. It's going to take more work. It's going to take a private therapist. It's going to take 12-step programs. It's going to take a lot of different things and a whole menu. But a weekend workshop or a week ain't going to do it. And by the way, last thing, anyone who ever really does make it to treatment, to workshops, to seminars, or any of it, the work begins when you get home. You know, we deliver all the tools, the opportunities. We can help you open your heart, open your spirit, and give you awareness and give you keys. But if you go back to the same life you were living when you left, then you're going to have the same life you were living when you left. Treatment is not just about what happens with us. It's about what you do with it when you get home.
Agree. So what are your thoughts about requesting an STD panel from our unfaithful partners, as well as requesting the use of condoms until I feel safe with him? P.S. He's had a couple of relapses since his initial discovery day. So
there's a great expression I learned. I'm going to write it in the chat. I learned this expression, one of the most important ones I learned in addiction treatment. Behaviors have consequences. Yes, I can do this. Consequences. It's a very simple phrase. It means everything for addicts. When, you know, your spouse comes to you and says, well, I can't believe you're using a condom and we've been married and don't you trust me? Behaviors have consequences. He has lied to you. He's been said he wasn't doing things that he was doing, and on more than one occasion. You absolutely need to protect your health. I would not have sex with someone who's actively lying to me without them wearing a condom, and certainly without them getting an STD panel. But I do have a bigger question for you as a partner, and I would ask you to consider this. There are many, I've been working with sex addicts, people with compulsive sexual disorders and their spouses for almost a quarter of a century. And one issue that I think, you know, kind of, let me get to my question here. One thing that I think always requires sort of reminding people of is, especially spouses, is what is the reason why I would begin to have sex with him or her again? So something's happened, there's been all this lying, this cheating, whatever. What would be the criteria that I would look for that would tell me that it was time to have sex with my partner again after the lying, you know, and there's only one, that you trust them. Now, trust is not rebuilt quickly. In my experience, when you've been deeply betrayed by a cheating partner, trust can take a year to rebuild or longer, while those of us who've cheated sit on our hands and hope that you will eventually forgive us. So the partner who wants to have sex really quickly after having found out that she or he has been betrayed, I question their motives. I'm not saying it's that you wouldn't enjoy the sex or it might not be fun, it might be the best sex you've ever had. But are you doing it because you want to make sure they don't go somewhere else? Are you doing it because you think if I have lots and lots of sex with them, then they will be tired and they won't act out? Are you doing it because you want to reassure yourself that since this person is still having sex with me, they still love me? There are many, many reasons why a betrayed spouse might choose to have sex with someone who's betrayed her or him. But I believe there's only one reason to begin having sex again. And the reason is because I now again trust him or her.
Okay. I 100% agree with that. Like you care. No, I love your background, by the way, too. Okay. Next question. Do you distinguish between self-compassion and complacency in recovery? I find myself in a relapse and want to be kind with myself about this slip, but I don't want to be so understanding that I don't return to doing the difficult recovery work.
This is a great question. So I think what this person's kind of saying is, I tend to beat myself up, as many of us do. And I'm trying very hard to understand, I'm going to interpret for them, or this is the message I want you guys to have. Slips happen, and they are part of the recovery process. And even to say that is to give permission in my mind to the addicts who think, oh, they happen? Oh, great. Well, I'm having a bad night, so I'll have my slip, and then I can say, Rob says slips happen. They don't happen like that. That's not a slip. That's a purposeful act. But there are times when those of us who kept ourselves emotionally distracted for many, many years with addiction slip back into that kind of thinking, and that will happen. I don't think that the criteria for how you treat yourself should be, well, let me say this. I don't think that taking on God, I really screwed this one up when you have a slip is the right attitude. I think a slip is something to be learned from. It's an opportunity to say, gee, what was I not noticing? What was I not seeing? What kind of support do I need more of on whatever level so that I can keep myself sober next time? If you turn it into an opportunity to beat yourself up, then you miss the lesson. You're so busy saying, I'm such a piece of crap, that you miss that this is a learning experience. This does not mean, however, that your spouse or someone who loves you won't be very, very angry and hurt that you had a slip. And yes, you do have to tell them, because you can't keep them out of the loop of your recovery. In fact, you may find that they're much more loving when you do tell them, even though they're going to be pissed, because at least they see that you're beginning to be honest with them. And honesty is the beginning of the rebuilding of trust, which is how you get to have sex back.
Well, and you know, my belief is that the slip didn't happen at this moment. It happened back here. So it's identifying what was going on back here, not just in the moment right before, but what was I doing or not doing? You know, how was I feeling? I mean, like you said, it's an opportunity to learn. So it's examining all those things so that it doesn't have to be a repeat, you know, down the road. So, but yeah.
By the way, if you're a sex addict, you've probably spent a lot of time beating yourself up already. And if that's been productive for you, you're a miracle worker, because I've never seen it be productive for anybody. But, you know, I would think something like, that is really not who I want to be. That is really not where I want to go. And a recommitment to healing is plenty of beating up. But your spouse may not feel that way, and they may be really angry at you, and that's because behaviors have consequences. And just because the slip is a learning experience for you, for your spouse, it's going to be more of a re-traumatization. The hope is at least that you will be honest now and not keep it hidden.
So I have to, there's one in here that says, Dr. Rob, please wear a green suit with only your face showing.
Why?
Because like the green screens, like where they do the weather, I think they think it'll just be your head on the screen. So.
Oh, if I do green screen, you don't even see me at all. I can actually try that, but interesting idea.
Yeah, let's stay focused.
I think green screen makes me look like that's a green screen.
Oh, whoa, that's wild. No, that's
so
kind of
that's
creepy.
me. Yeah,
okay.
So that's what that would look like. But why don't we continue to do our work?
Yes, I was going to say, we digress. The next question, now you look like...
Oh, I have to turn the green screen off. Sorry.
My addict husband has been in recovery since January. I have as well. We're living separately. We're seeing a couples therapist for the first time this week. Any advice to couples at this stage?
I'm going to let you go first, Tammy.
I think make sure you have a couples therapist who understands this work specifically. I think that's really important. I just was answering an email from someone who the couples therapist was not kind to the betrayed partner, and was basically saying she shouldn't ask any questions and she shouldn't, whatever. So I think it's really critically important that you have a qualified couples therapist. And if you're both in recovery, you're making progress. So it's, addressing the issues that you have. I'm going to, in the chat, I'm going to put, for people who are looking for a couples, to do some couples work on a more intensive basis.
So let me say something about that, Tammy, actually. So what Tammy's doing is, we heard you. We have been getting a lot of feedback from you guys. Well, you're doing all this work for the addict, but what about me, the spouse? And okay, we're getting there, and we're starting with couples workshops. So for betrayed couples who are in a crisis or in a stage change, like needing to make a move or figure something out, we have a 35-year expert in sex addiction couples work doing this particular set of couples work, and Tammy's going to post it in the chat. Is that what you're doing? I
did. Yes. It's rebuilding trust, genuine forgiveness, intimacy, establishing and implementing healthy boundaries, communication skills, learning how to have respectful and productive conflicts, etc., etc. There's more. So
as long as we are sharing things that we do, I'll share something we do for free, no charge, bupkis. And that is, I have a very popular now podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And if you're someone who likes podcasts, and who doesn't like a good podcast now and then, I have some amazing guests from really some of the most interesting minds, I think, in psychotherapy and addiction and attachment and trauma. And every show, we have almost over 50 shows. We're a top 10 healthcare webs podcast now. We've really just, I think it's just something to listen to in the car or on the bus or on the subway. You know, if you find yourself obsessing about what your spouse did, listen to us. We are talking about answers and solutions. If you find yourself saying, I got to go act out, listen to us. You'll think, oh, well, they sound better than I'm doing. I'll listen to them. Anyway, Sex, Love, and Addiction is the podcast. They're all free. Please join us because you'll learn a lot. And
I put a link in about that too. So do you have advice for going to the couples therapist?
I had actually another thing to say about that, to that couple, which is I think that, so let me repeat the question. This is a married couple, I assume, or a committed couple. They're living separately. They're seeing a couples therapist. They've been working on these issues about 6 months. And what should we be working on? And, you know, I'm not going to advise in any way what the therapy is because I think that's so unique and individual to you as a couple. But I can tell you what I think this time is about for you as a separated couple. I think it's time to date and get to know each other. You know, my hope is that you are going out and doing fun things and you're seeing, re-experiencing your compatibility, your shared interests, maybe processing some of the difficult stuff if it comes up. But I think at this stage, the reason you're not living together is because you want to stay out of some of the drama and try to repair. So bring the drama to the therapy and try to have some fun out there with each other when you're spending time together, because that's how you're going to reinvent your relationship.
So the next question is, I've been in SAA and CODA since December last year and haven't been to a group in a month because of work, but I haven't been contacted by anyone in these groups about how things are, and I can't help but take it personally. Because of that, I just want to throw it all away and go back to acting out, even though the support don't seem to care about me. I know that they know I'm not there because of work, since I mentioned my workload a lot, but I feel it's bad that no one in 3 groups has checked in.
Well, I have thoughts about that, but Tammy, I'm going to let you lead that one.
So one of the things that I learned early on in the meetings was I have to pick up the phone. Now, they used to be different than this. They used to be really heavy, like 100 pounds, you know, and they were attached to a wall and everything.
Tammy, that's not relevant now.
No, it is. I know, but I'm saying it was about me reaching out. It wasn't that they all are supposed to, you know, I mean, you can build those relationships and things like that, but, you know, it was on me to reach out and connect. And like, do you have a sponsor? Have you, you know, if you've got a sponsor in these that you have been going to, and, you know, does your sponsor say you should check in with me every day? I mean, what is that? And the other thing I want to say is, that is so typical addict of like, I'll show you, I'm gonna hurt you by hurting myself. I'm gonna go act out. So I don't find, I mean, I get the feelings and taking it personally, but you know, it's one of those things where one of the things we talk about in meetings, and you've been there long enough to talk about resentments, you know, and having a resentment at those people, you know, ultimately, if you act out, they'll probably still be at the meetings and they'll probably still be working on their recovery. So, so there are lots of meetings online. Rob does one on Fridays, on In the Rooms at 6 p.m. Pacific time. There's these, we've got drop-in groups all, you know, all different times, morning and evening, you know, so there has to be some, and the SAA has online meetings. There's lots of places to find meetings. So, so my thought is that, you know, I could always find time to act out. I could always find time, even if I had a really heavy workload. So when I got into recovery, I had to find time to get to meetings. So that's my thoughts.
I was trying to find your old phone.
It was attached to the wall, and it was called a landline, as we call them now. There were no such things as anything else. So.
I wanted to say something else about that, but I think you deleted the question, so I couldn't.
No, I didn't. It's at the top.
Oh, it's at the top.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this question. So here's something to think about. I love your question. I feel you're hurt. I know what it's like to have nobody feel like I put something in and nobody cares. I'm out there and they know I'm struggling and they don't even notice. And it makes me want to say, screw the whole thing. I get all of that. I cannot I can't impress this on you more strongly than I'm saying right now. This experience is a learning opportunity for you. You are having strong feelings about things that are understandably upsetting, but the way you're thinking about handling them is not healthy. Healthy people say, oh, I miss someone, let me give them a call, or I wish they'd called me, let me reach out, or let me drop them an email, or let me tell them how much. We don't hold other people responsible for how much they need to reach out to us, need to call. That's on us. Unbelievably, to many addicts, most people aren't thinking about us most of the time. They're thinking about themselves. And so, and if you think about what people go to meetings for and what they're dealing with, unless you had a specific plan where, and this is what I would be doing in a meeting, could somebody call me Monday? Could somebody call me Tuesday? And who will that be? And line them up. And that's how you get people to call you. You make sure that it happens. Ultimately, you are responsible for your own happiness. And if you are someone who feels you need to be hearing from people, they don't know that. So, and they're not going to be necessarily thinking to check in with you. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, I didn't make enough of an impression on them. I'm not important enough to them. Who knows if any of that is true? They may just be busy. And so I would suggest to you that you put down the attitude, which is the deepest part of your problem, saying that it's their fault for hurting me, rather than I miss them and I'd like to reach out. You have it backwards. And this is such an important part of your recovery. You may say, I'm an asshole, I'm a jerk, I hate that guy. It's not. This is a great lesson for you in your courage in asking this question, and in the answer that I hope you're hearing, which is not other people's responsibility to keep you happy. And yes, we do say in meetings that we will reach out, we will stay in touch, but not everyone is thinking about that or aware of it unless you really make a point of it. Understand this. Many people come in and out of 12-step meetings and other kinds of support groups all the time. They come for weeks and months, but unless they really invest themselves, like they take on a commitment to sell the books, or they become the accountant for the meeting, or the secretary, unless they get involved, they're just another person passing through. And I have to tell you, sadly, that's what life is. Without our investment in other people, and not just what they can give us, but what we have to give them, it's just a whole lot of people going by.
I agree. I'm going to encourage you, get on an online meeting, get an online drop-in group that works with your time. Even if it's an AA open meeting and you're listening, it's still better than not. The worst place for me to be, especially early in recovery, was in here.
In my head. Yes. Thank you, Tammy.
That was a terrible place for me to be. Okay. So this goes back to the first question about the divorce. And so she's been told multiple times not to make those life-changing decisions within the first year of recovery. If it's a good idea today, we've been separated over a month, so proceed with a divorce so soon.
Uh-huh.
He's in recovery, and so he's been told those things. To me, it's like, if he's not listening to the don't make those major life decisions in the first year, it's kind of like, what choice do you have? So, right? Thoughts?
So I think this is a really good question. I believe that if you know in your heart that something is not working, you know it in your heart. You know if you're committed to something. I know if I'm committed to working on something, or if I'm just hanging out because I think it's the right thing to do and I'm supposed to. And that's a feeling. It's a felt experience. If you deeply believe that your relationship is not something that you want to be committed to, or you want to grow, or you want to participate in, if you find yourself more relieved than missing this person, that they're not around, follow your heart. I think that what is important is to not make decisions in anger. If I am feeling, I just want to kill that person, but I lived with them for 12 years and love them, that's probably not the right time to make a decision. But if I've been to some therapy, we've been working as a couple, we did some separation, and I just don't see this moving forward, that's different. However, You better is, and you haven't said that, but some people do, and this may not be you, but this is for everyone to learn from. If you're saying you might want to proceed with separation or divorce, but you're really thinking, because I've met this new person, then that's not a reason to proceed. Because if you proceed with someone else without ending this relationship, you will never know if you did the right thing. You have to be clean when ending one thing before you move on to another.
So the next question, we're 6 months out from discovery. I've been asked to give a couple session, a reason why I acted well with escorts in particular near the beginning of my relationship of 10 years with my wife. My acting out, porn, occasional escorts predated my relationship. I've been searching my old self for months and can't find a concrete reason other than for pure narcissism, lack of thinking of the consequences, my low self-worth, and the way I had compartmentalized my addictive actions from the rest of my life. I've already told her this over time and not sure if saying these things in a session will be enough to help her decide if we should stay together. I guess my question is there really a simple answer I can give her? But what I can say to her, she only says I'm still here because we have young children.
Okay, hold on just one sec. Just one quick sec. All right. I like this question also. Okay. There is a reason. So let me tell you the reason you acted out. You like this, Tammy? This is my urban
I do.
legend.
Yes.
Really? Oh, okay, good. I found a little pink rotary phone, and I was trying to put 100 of them behind me, but I couldn't make it work. So why did you work out? First of all, you said this. Why did you act? Someone is asking, you're saying, here are some reasons I think I acted out. Pure narcissism, which means I was just thinking about me and me only. Lacking of thinking of the consequences, like I can just get away with this, and if he or she doesn't know, it doesn't matter. My low self-worth, yes, I need constant validation from other people, and sex and romance is one way to feel wanted. And the way I compartmentalized my addictive relationships in the rest of my life, yes, so you could get away with it. So I'm sorry, what's wrong with all those answers? They're all good ones. And I would add the fifth addictive one, which is you could. You did it because it was fun. You did it because you could. Now, if you wanted to go into really detailed psychoanalysis about why you chose escorts as opposed to an affair, as opposed to porn, we could probably, and I could probably, doing some work, figure that one out for you. But I think the more important thing to look at is, we're sex addicts. We're just grabbing what feels good and going with it. There isn't a lot of rhyme or reason to it. However, if you act out in a certain way all the time, consistently over time, there might be meaning in it. For example, when I'm working with someone in treatment who had sex, let's say they're married, and they were having an affair with the grocery clerk and the neighbor next door, and they were fooling around with the babysitter, and it's like all around their home, and their neighborhood, I can probably tell you that that person has different emotional issues and probably different trauma than the person who says, I'm never going to act out. I'm only going to act out when I'm on the road. It's only going to be a prostitute. I'm never going to see them again. Those probably, the way that we do that probably comes from a different place inside of us related to our trauma and early upbringing. But how you acted out in terms of whether you saw escorts or not, listen, a lot of spouses, they are almost always asking this question. Did you do this because you loved me? Do you still love me? Do you love me? Did you pick escorts because you didn't want to have an affair because you knew you might not get involved? In other words, I wonder what the question is that your spouse is really asking, because I think there's something underneath that for them. For you, it's as simple as all the four things you listed, and you could, and you did. It doesn't really require more thinking than that.
Yeah, and I get asked this a lot too. It's like, why would he or she do this? Why? And at the end of the day, I go, how is why going to, what is it like you said, what is it you're really looking for? What is the real question? Because even if you understand the why, it isn't going to change the behavior, so it's almost like trying to figure out how to get in front of the behavior the next time or something. So at the end of the day, and I put in the chat, the ASAM definition of addiction. If you look at all this, it's like your brain is offline. You make choices.
Broken.
Yeah. So they're, to a logical person, the behavior looks crazy. To an addict, it looks completely like the right choice.
In the moment.
Yes.
But I also understand a spouse saying things like, if someone who loved me couldn't do this, so
Right.
how could you do this and love me? Help me
Yes.
understand what you were thinking when you did this. Like, that sounds like a spouse to me.
Yes, and that's more what I'm saying is like there's something underneath it because you identified the whys and it's I chose this behavior and it predated so at some point it's you did it and you're learning not to do that again.
Oh, and I will say one more thing about that.
Yeah.
Men's sexuality, male sexuality, is cued to new stimulation. That's why we like porn, men in general, because there's all those new pictures. Um, People who like novelty, for someone who likes novelty and that's a big turn on for them, that person might be more likely to see a dozen different people, whereas someone else who likes safety may choose one or two of the same people. But it still isn't about your marriage or your partner. It's about something to do with you.
So then it continues, how do we build trust? Her sponsor has even had a partner who lied to her and her therapist and their therapists and kept acting out for years before he found out again. In my partner's mind, anything is possible, including building up cash reserves for escorts $1 at a time, or even pretending to be working the 12-step programs, therapy, etc., while still acting out. I can't argue with this, so how do I begin to rebuild trust? I feel that I'm being honest, not acting out now, and it just seems so hard.
Okay, so a couple of things. Number one, I wrote a book for men who've cheated on a woman and they're trying to repair intimacy. It is called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. I didn't write a book for women. Someone else can write that book. I have worked with so many men who have cheated on a female partner that I've come to understand that men almost universally don't understand what the problem is. We are, men in general, we are problem solvers. We're like, if Tammy says she had a bad day, I'm not going to ask her what happened. I'm just going to ask her, how can I fix it? Because that's sort of men, we go right to that. That's who we are. And by the way, ladies often just want to talk about their day. They don't want us to fix it, but we want to get right to the fix it because that makes us feel good. We did something for them. So, why am I saying all that? Oh, because, if you chose escort, I don't think trust can be, I think the only way to build trust once it's been broken is that words don't matter anymore. Behaviors matter. Actions matter. To the partner, to the partner of someone who is a year or less in recovery, everything is important to you, isn't it? Do they take the garbage out when they say they were? Did they pick the kids up on time? Did they come home when they said they would? Of course it's all important to you because you don't have trust. And in your mind, when they're a half hour late and you don't know what's going on, you partners start spinning into, well, maybe it's this all over again. So this is an addict who asked the question. You cannot, you alone cannot rebuild trust. What you can do is keep your side of the street clean. You can be honest. You can show up for things when you say you're going to. Don't whine about having work to do when dinner's ready. Just go to dinner. Try to be a better spouse and a better partner. But don't try, please forgive me, I'm so sorry, I really love you, I didn't mean it. That's useless. And this is a long-term proposition. I mean, it takes partners 9 months to a year or more to really begin to trust again. And that's provided we're doing everything right. So understand that if you're in a marriage and you've harmed your marriage, you are committed to a long-term healing process if you love that person, and it's not going to be on your timeline. The last thing to say is, it seems so hard, you said. I'm being so honest. I'm not acting out. And what I read into that is I want more from this person than they're giving me. I get that. But they're not available. They're angry. They're hurt. You deserve more than you're getting, but they can't give it. This is what we're for, sponsors, therapists, people in support, people in recovery. You do need more than your spouse can give right now, and you don't want to turn back to acting out to get it. That's what we're here for. That's what that's probably Tammy right now getting a phone call from someone who needs help. That's why we're here. So you can get your needs met, but you can't make her trust you. That requires her or him seeing you acting in ways that are trustworthy over time. And again, I wrote a book about it. I make about 12 cents when you buy one, so feel free to get those quarters and dimes rolling in my direction, because most money goes to publishers. But Doghouse is a kick-ass book if you're a guy who does not understand why your woman is so darn mad. That's for sure.
Well, and I just listened to the podcast that you did with Carol, the coach, today, and she was talking about that in the timeline for it's the latest released one for those of you that follow. But she was talking about the timeline for betrayed partners to learn to be able to trust, et cetera, too. So that may be helpful for you to listen to as well. Yes.
And I'll add one more thing.
Yes.
It also depends on how long you've been together. Couples who've been together a year and a half, a year or 2 years, when trust is broken, it's devastating because it's like an atom bomb, on a very small town. But I don't want to use that metaphor. It's like dropping a bomb on a very small town. It's only going to affect one part of it, But if I'm sorry, if you consider a short relationship, like up to 3 years, is like a small town, when you drop a bomb on a small town, the whole town gets screwed up. When a relationship has been together for 15 or 20 years, there's a lot more field of play. There's kids, family, church, so the bomb gets dropped on one part and then it kind of gets scattered around. So couples who haven't been together as long don't have as much to build on to rebuild trust. It's almost like starting as a couple again, and so it can take longer.
Well, and you mentioned young kids, and so I assume it's a shorter period of time, so that may be more what you're dealing with as well. But like going back to how do you rebuild trust? You participate, you show up, as the parent and as the spouse. So, okay, so going back to the one with the relapse, I can be very hard on myself. What can people like me do to change this?
Well, I don't know. So this person is saying I'm really, really hard on myself. What does that really mean? I used to be really, really hard on myself. If I had a disappointing experience, it meant and this is true, my truth. I can remember in graduate school, so when I was in my 30s, if I had a bad experience or a couple of them, I might hang out in my bed for the next day and not even go out. Like that's how much bad things could bring me down. And then I had to learn a couple of years later that I was depressed and that I didn't have a lot of stamina for bad things happening to me, that I would just get really depressed and hate myself and shame-based and ruminate because I had a biological problem with depression. So I just want to say that I'm not suggesting you go see psychiatrists and take meds. I don't know you or your story, but if you find that mild to moderate disappointments leave you devastated, and having difficulty getting yourself moving again and really beating yourself up and feeling like it's lingering with you for days, those are signs of depression. You should be able to bounce back faster. You should be able to make sense of it, and there are also signs of trauma. So it could be a longer term issue, but both of those things are something I might see a professional for. So if having trouble bouncing back is a sign of emotional challenges, period. So you might it could be narcissistic challenges, it could be depressive challenges, but any of that is worth talking to a professional about, I think.
So the next question, as a love addict, what are some red flags to watch out for online and in person of a sex addict? I've been used before, but since done a lot of work. I'm interested in your professional advice.
Okay, well, I don't think you're going to read red flags online. I mean, if you're looking at someone's profile, especially a sex addict, boy, have we spent a lot of time working on that profile to make it look like there's no hooks. We work hard at looking like we are not that guy who's just looking for sex. We will write profiles that will make you think we're looking for something more when really we just want sex. So I don't think there's anything in a digital experience that can leave you trusting or feeling more trustworthy or someone who might be a sex addict. I think that you have to meet them, you have to spend time with them, and you have to see how that goes. Even in the beginning, if you're engaging someone online, so let me rewrite this little thing for you. If you are a woman listening today and you make bad choices around men, you choose addicts, you choose troubled people, you choose people who are still married, they just didn't tell you, what that means is you absolutely can find love and you should not give up. It does mean that you probably need to have a very clear plan in writing for who you date, who you don't date, what kind of dates you continue with, what kind of dates you don't. And you have some people around that are supportive to you that you run these dating experiences by. For example, I might create a plan that says, I don't date people who are still married. I don't date people who are using drugs. I don't date people who don't drive or have a job. I might date, and then but then I meet somebody and they're just fascinating to me and I can't get enough of them. And then maybe the fact that they don't drive isn't as so important because I drive and I can pick them up. And well, the fact that they're still married, I mean, they're not living with their ex. So we can, when we have a fascination with someone, start to make excuses for things that we at first thought would not be acceptable. And all of a sudden we lower our standards. This is on us. So setting really clear standards for what healthy dating is, who that person would be, and how would you know if you were dating someone healthy or not, and then having other people hold you accountable to that is the best way to begin to date in a healthy way. So my answer to your question is you can't do it alone. You need other men or women in your life who know your story, know your dating history, know how you've made your bad decisions, and can already see when you're about to make another one even before you do, because you won't see it. And that's what we're here for. Dating for love addicts and people who have a history of picking bad partners is no longer a game you can play by yourself. Dating is something you have to do with other people holding your hand.
And you've done this, you've done a really nice job on previous webinars about talking about dating and having a dating plan and all that. So I'd invite you to watch.
Let's turn that into a video.
No, and we're going to do a podcast too. You and I have talked
Okay.
about that too. So, okay, so the next question, I want to hear your answer to this one. Hi, Dr. Rob. So as a sex porn addict, I've been looking at my husband in a sexual fetish kind of way recently. This happened in the beginning when we started dating and stopped for a while, but now it's been triggered again. So now instead of looking to porn to be aroused, but visualizing him in that way, would you consider this productive in recovery?
Well, I think it's productive that you're not hooking up online. This is a tricky question because fetishes and kink are not considered addiction. So if you enjoy being tied up, you like a little leather, you want your husband to put on panties, it depends on what you consider to be kink or fetish. It's different for different people. But if it is a mutually consensual behavior that you and your husband enjoy together or he can enjoy with you, it's perfectly fine. In fact, you need to tell him and quickly that this is something you've thought about and you've had in your mind and that you played out, but it actually interests you with him. I would actually like to see this as a good thing. I think many therapists might say, oh, well, you just saw those other people as objects and now you want to use your husband as an object. Well, maybe that's maybe a little true, but not entirely. You're saying that there's a particular thing that turns you on that you kept out of your relationship for whatever reason for a long time. And you went over here to do it. Well, now you're not allowed to go over there to do it anymore. And you're looking at your spouse and thinking, well, maybe we could do this together. I think that's a great thing. I think you should talk to him about it. I think you should also talk to a therapist about it to determine, depending on where you are in the process of recovery and where you guys are. But having something that turns you on that isn't what turns everybody else on, there's nothing wrong with that, and it isn't an addiction. But and even if you acted it out in your addiction, but how you play it out in your marriage, I think is something that requires a lot of thought, observation, and I think it's good that you're raising the question, is this productive or not? I don't think I can give you that answer. I think you have to reveal what it is to your spouse, reveal what it is in therapy, and start working on it.
So the next one, my husband has been seeing a therapist for over a year now, and although she is certified in trauma, she's not certified in sex addiction. And sometimes he comes home from therapy and tells me about it, and I feel like her advice on things she has him work on is not the way or in order that a sex therapy would have him do. There's not really a question here, but just talk about.
I hear a wife who's saying, I don't feel like your therapy is going the way I want it to. And, there are two things about that. If your husband was actively acting out and now he's not, if he's working on himself, growing, going to some support groups, is seemingly honest, then what he's doing in therapy isn't any of your business. Truly, none of your business. How it goes, what order it goes. If he's doing okay, then what he's doing is not necessary. However, If there are things going on in your relationship that are serious and important to you and they're not getting addressed in therapy, and you don't hear him bringing it and you don't hear him bringing it back, and you're married, then I would say, I would like to go to therapy with you sometime. I really feel like there's some important things that I want to talk about that don't get brought up. And I would go to therapy with him. Or I would say, you know what? I know that it's not my place to deal with anything goes on in your individual therapy, but I'm not happy with our relationship. Let's go to some couples therapy. That's where you're going to get your answers, where either you've been invited into the room to participate or you have an equal playing field. What you're saying is meaningful. It's just you can't do anything with it sitting at home by yourself. So I think it's something that you have to pull your husband in and say, I'm not happy with the way your progress is going. I'm not pleased with the way we're doing. We need to do some work on each other, and then make sure the person you pick knows a lot about these issues. And Tammy, if you write her, I guarantee you she'll be able to refer you to someone who knows a lot about these issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. It added, he's not doing okay and not making progress. So,
Well, yes.
okay. And then the last question of the
I
evening,
saw
if
it.
a couple separates, how long should each individual attend and work on their own issues through individual therapy before attempting couples therapy?
Well, I wish I could answer that with a simple question, but the reality is that every couple is different. In general, I think when someone has just found out about a sex addiction problem and there's a lot of rage and a lot of upset and spouses are just, I think that is a good time for each of you to do a little bit of individual work, just so you can deal with your shame, your embarrassment, your anger, whatever's going on with you, and they can get support for how much they want to kill you, and how angry they are and how their life has been ruined and the sort of high level pain that they're in. Later on, couples, when the anger has toned down some, when you have some sense of what you're doing, at least a little bit, I think it's a really good time to start some couples therapy. Couples therapy can also be really useful in the beginning to help a couple have a guideline for what they're individually supposed to be doing on their own over time. Um, if a couple is separated, I think that the issue is very different, because now you have a couple that I think you absolutely, couples therapy is really your only venue toward connection. In other words, let me try it a different way. If I'm in a separated couple, if I was working with a separated couple, other than childcare and absolute things that need to be taken care of, separation is separation. So I would assume you never see that partner unless you have childcare or parenting issues to do, because separated people are separated unless they are in a therapeutic separation, which is something that is organized by a therapist or a professional to help you guys start to date, start to get to know each other, decide when to be sexual. But again, I don't think that these are things that, I think that if you are in a place where you can own your own anger, own your own history, and not lash out at each other unduly, then you're ready for couples work. It's just when a couples therapist becomes a referee who's saying, now you stay on your side and you stay on your, that it's almost not that productive. I think we're out of time, my friend Tammy.
We are. So thank you all for joining us. We will be back again next week, same time.
And let me say that I am on intherooms.com every Friday night, which is a large 12-step recovery organization. And I show up at 6 p.m. California time to offer free support and advice there. And thank you guys. We couldn't do this if you weren't here. So
yes.
Thanks for showing up. Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Bye. Bye.